Hi,
Greetings,
I am Ajita.
I'm Harshil.
I work for an Anchor company,
I'm a volunteer at the Queer Rights Centre at One Future Collective.
and here are my thoughts on.
Veganism.
I believe that we assume that since somebody has to be vegan because it's a fairly new concept, probably just about 100 years old, you assume that everything will be expensive, but no, that's not the case. Yes, how about this? Majority of the times when you're a vegan, you're eating a lot of plant-based diet. You're eating a lot of lentils. You're eating a lot of tofu, tempeh, chickpeas, etc. All this is pretty as affordable as you probably buying your meat, because let's say you buy a meat at a certain amount and you're just converting that into tofu or tempeh or chickpeas, etc. So, and the rest is of course continuing to be your vegetables, lentils, your carbs such as rice, etc. So, I don't think it's unaffordable.
I slightly agree. I still think that you can follow a vegan diet eating fruits, vegetables, pulses, grains, and different spices, essentially just cutting out meat and fish, and finding like vegan protein sources such as pulses, and cutting out dairy, which would probably be a bit more difficult. However, you would have to do a lot of research and probably look at alternatives to making things like curd and milks, which you can make at home. However, not everyone has the luxury to do this at home, not everyone has the time to, and also it will be a lot more difficult because you will essentially be cutting out certain food groups, and not everyone can afford vegan alternatives such as oat milk and vegan yogurt and cheese.
I believe that yes, while India is a vegetarian nation, we do have a lot of vegetarian options. However, veganism is not something that has completely sort of evolved in this country. So yes, lack of options do sometimes cause a hindrance in people following a vegan diet, especially when it comes to milk or dairy. It's easy to give up non-veg in India, but it's probably not as easy to give up, let's say, your dairy products, your milk, your butter, your ghee. Especially in India, we consume a lot of ghee. However, slowly I'm noticing that there are a lot of options being given out because people are more aware of it, people understand what's about. So there are a lot of options coming, especially online, wherein you can purchase affordable dairy-free products.
I agree with this. I would also say the lack of affordable options. Veganism is a fairly new concept in India. There's also a misconception that the majority of Indians are vegetarian, which just isn't true. And the majority of the population does not have access to vegan food in the sense of a lot of vegan alternatives. Vegetarian food is fairly accessible, and we're starting to see more vegan alternatives pop up in urban cities, but they are very expensive and tend to be inaccessible to most of the population. I would also say a big factor is probably culture, in the sense that a lot of specific cultures have diets where meat and fish and dairy are staple, so this can be quite difficult for anyone wanting to just try a vegan diet. I was born vegetarian, so for me it was a lot easier to go vegan. But not everyone has the same privilege or access to vegan food that I do. But what I would say is to look, if you want to try veganism but you are kind of struggling from a cultural sense, look to maybe like vegan people and bloggers from your own cultural background who have veganized versions of dishes that you enjoy. Because it is important to also remember that food is political, and there's a big history with how food and food cultivation works from certain backgrounds.
I disagree. Let me explain this with an example. Let's say if you have 1,000 acres of land, of the 1,000 acres, 500 is fruits and vegetables, and the other 500 is for your cattle and your meat produce. Now, when you're producing something which is both, let's say, meat as well as your fruits and vegetables for, let's say, a single human being, human beings will always tend to eat both. Now, imagine if you just take the cattle bit away. Why? Now, cattle, or even let's say pork for that matter, right? Your pigs, they all consume water as well. There's water required to produce, let's say, the electricity. There's water required to produce the food that they eat, most important thing. So here, what are you doing? You're creating fruits and vegetables for human beings, plus you're also creating, let's say, somewhere down here, some more fodder to feed your cattle or your pigs, etc. You're not only feeding the human beings, you're feeding human beings. Why? Because plants unfortunately continue to be a main part of your diet, but plants continue to be a main part of your meat, the meat you eat, right, for your cattle and your pigs continue to be a main part of their diet, and then you consume them, right? Now imagine if you just take that away. So you'll actually reduce the carbon footprint by half easily. Why? Because you don't have to produce that extra fodder. You don't have to use that extra water to produce that fodder. You don't have to use the extra water to feed the cattle. So yes, there's definitely going to be a big difference if let's say, as you know, I read somewhere 4 billion people were to go vegan, you will easily reduce the carbon footprint by half.
I disagree with this. While I do think it is, there are certain vegans who may not have the best environmental footprint. Overall, I feel cutting out meat and dairy goes a long way in curbing a negative environmental impact, because animals produce a lot of methane into the atmosphere. But of course you need to be wary of where your food comes from, such as your fruits and vegetables. So it's always important to buy locally as opposed to getting exotic and kind of trendy fruits and vegetables shipped from across the world, and including those in your diet.
I would say disagree. Now here's my point. Majority of your vitamins can come from even a plant-based diet. When I say majority, which means your vitamin A, B, C. I'll get to D later, but vitamin A, C, D, it's possible to get from plant-based diet. Omega-3 is also possible to get from a plant-based diet. Even your proteins, it's a big myth that only animals give you the protein. As far as nutrition goes, only animals give you protein. You can have more than enough access to protein even on a vegan diet, let's say with, like I mentioned before, chickpeas, tofu, tempeh, broccoli has a source of protein, your lentils, etc., right? However, there is one deficiency for which we will have to take supplements, being if you end up going on a vegan diet, which is your B12. So definitely required in specifically with B12. Unfortunately, don't get enough plant-based nutrition or vitamins from B12 for B12. So but at the end of the day, it's not just about, of course it is about sustainability, and it's about ensuring that we live in a better world and in a better place, but it's also about the fact that we should be against animal cruelty.
Again, I disagree with this because you could be a meat eater, you could be a vegetarian, but have a poor diet in the sense that you're not getting food from different food groups, so you could still be nutrient deficient. It doesn't have anything to do with being vegan. You just need to do a lot of research in the sense of knowing what food groups you're eating and what types of foods you can eat from certain food groups. But I would say that if you do choose to go vegan, it is important to supplement your diet with B12 because that is only found in meat and dairy. So taking tablets or this in liquid form. And then after a few months of trying a vegan diet, definitely get a blood test to see if you are nutrient deficient, and then see what other types of foods you should be eating. But it is important to remember that everyone's body is different and everyone's body reacts differently to food.
These are my thoughts. I am Ajita. Thank you for tuning into Opinionated.
These are my thoughts. I am Harshil, and thank you for tuning in to Opinionated.